Welcome.
Witamy.
Witajcie.
Добро пожаловать.
Welcome. Sveiki atvykę.
欢迎
Tere tulemast.
Deutschland und andere Länder mit Anna Lasonczyk. Der erste und einzige Podcast in Deutschland, Österreich und der Schweiz, der sich mit interkultureller Kommunikation beschäftigt, spannende Impulse über fremde Länder liefert, entfernte Kulturen näher bringt und erfolgreiche Menschen mit internationaler Erfahrung interviewt. Heute im Gespräch mit Anna Lasonczyk, Linda Boakye, World-Class-Coach und Speakerin. Sie coacht internationale Fußballstars und Unternehmen, hat in 5 Ländern gewohnt und kommt gebürtig aus Ghana.
Herzlich willkommen zum interkulturellen Podcast Andere Länder, andere Sitten mit Anna Lasonczyk. Und heute mit einem besonderen Gast, Linda Boakye. Und deswegen wechsle ich jetzt zum Englisch, weil sie kein Deutsch spricht. Hello Linda, it's great to have you here. I just welcomed you very much.
Thank you.
It's so fantastic that you took the invitation. You are a world-class business career strategist and international speaker. 2 months ago you were speaking in Los Angeles in front of 3,500 people.
I was, yes.
You also coaches famous football players and international professionals to help in their career. And you were born in Ghana.
I was, yes.
You've already lived in 5 countries, because then you moved to UK where you studied. You spent some time in China teaching English, and you were more than 1 year in France and then Mexico, and now since a couple of months you are in Germany. Because
I am.
So amazing. I can't wait to talk to you about your stories, what you've experienced.
Oh yes, there's a lot of stories there.
Okay, so let's start with the very beginning. So what do you think the people don't know about Ghana? Especially you moved to UK, so what did you realize that people just don't have even a clue how it's the life there?
I think that the stark and shocking thing for me moving to the UK is people not realizing that there are differences in terms of economic differences in the people that live in Ghana. I think the media can be quite manipulative in the way it's portrayed. So, as I said, people would think that everyone in Africa, that Africa itself was a country, and that they didn't realize there was different countries within that.
Oh,
and then
no.
I know. and then also people thought you just lived in permanent poverty and you somehow got lucky to move there, and they didn't realize that actually there are people that are well off, as well as there is poverty, and poverty is real, but it's not a blanket, just like it is in the UK or anywhere else. There's people that are doing okay economically and people that are not doing so well.
Yeah.
So that was interesting for me.
Yeah. How was your life as a child in Ghana?
My life was pretty good, actually. As I went to a private school, I went to an English school as well, so actually I don't sound as Ghanaian as people would expect. Most people think I was born in the UK, but I was born in Ghana up until the age of about 14 when I moved to the UK. But I had a good life. My parents both worked. They were doing okay. They weren't the richest people in Ghana, but they were doing okay.
Your mom was a nurse, and
Yes, my mum was a nurse, and my dad worked in a company that exported cocoa to the West. So he made quite a reasonable living, which gave us a comfortable life in Ghana.
So why did you move to England?
My mum first got a job in the UK, so she'd moved there for about 7 years and was working in the UK. And then my dad decided he didn't want to do the long distance thing anymore. Why do people move? A lot of it has to do with love. So my dad decided we would join her there after 7 years. So
how was it for you? How much in advance did you know it? How did it happen?
How did it happen? Very fast, quite unconventionally really. So I was in boarding school at the time, Actually, I remember this because it was during my accounting exam. The headmistress came to the exam room and called me. I was like, well, what's she doing? I'm in the middle of an exam. And she was like, oh, we've just received a phone call from your dad. Your family's relocating to the UK. So in 2 days, you're going to have to pack and leave. And I couldn't believe it. I knew that my dad had the intention, but I couldn't believe how quick it was. And
in 2 days?
In 2 days. And I had to pack my stuff. And I was in boarding school that was quite far from where my parents lived. It was about 5 hours away. And I hadn't seen my dad in so long, so just hearing this from my headmistress, and we weren't allowed phones or any sort of communication with the outside. It was a Catholic boarding school, so fairly strict. And yeah, I just had to move. So actually, I didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell any of my friends.
You disappeared and
I disappeared. I got my bags, packed most of the things. I left like my mattress and things just so that I wouldn't arouse the suspicion that I wasn't coming back, and just moved. And obviously I didn't need it because I was moving to the UK, so I wouldn't need all those things. And I moved. I went to Accra, which is the capital, and then within 2 days we moved to the UK. I literally had hand luggage 15 kilos to pack my life and start a new life in the UK.
Wow.
How crazy.
That's amazing. So how was the beginning in England when you just got there? What just struck you? What was different at the first sight for you?
Everything. You know, coming from, again, being in a British boarding school and thinking, well, I had the same education as British people. So I think for people that don't know, Ghana was colonized by the British, so we have English as our official language, even though we have 47 other languages in Ghana. So
47 languages?
47 languages.
Within one country?
Within one country. Yeah, Africa is a fascinating place. So that was different, because coming to the UK and realizing, even though I spoke English, the accent was different. I didn't understand the slang. They spoke a lot faster than we do in Ghana, and I couldn't understand people. And then there's the issue with different accents, which you don't really know when you're living in Ghana. So that was a massive shock.
Yeah, was the speed of life also faster?
Yes. I mean, coming as a teenager, the lives of teenagers in the UK was far different to what I was used to. So, for example,
which ways? Yeah.
a girl of my age at that time wouldn't wear makeup. You just didn't do that. In boarding school, we all had to cut our hair.
How
old was I? About 14.
Okay.
And in boarding school, we all had to cut our hair for uniformity. And here, everybody had different styles, and even at school, lots of the girls had makeup on and curled their hair and was just so into their appearances and looked so much older and so much mature and more outspoken than your average Ghanaian girl at that age. So that was different. And also just making friends. I mean, I'd left all my friends behind. I'd even left my boyfriend behind.
And you didn't even say goodbye?
I didn't say goodbye. You also
left your boyfriend?
My boyfriend, I didn't say...
So you just disappeared and he didn't know that you were leaving?
Nope, I didn't let myself tell anyone because I couldn't believe it, and I didn't want to...
You were shocked.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't want to say, oh, I'm leaving, and then that something goes wrong and then I'm still there. So we wrote letters to each other at the time.
Yeah, that year there were no mobile phones. They were not as common as
Yeah, they weren't as common.
No Facebook.
Exactly. Well, I suppose we had, later on I discovered Bebo and MySpace at the time.
Yeah.
I'm showing my age now. So yeah, telling him afterwards and just forming those friendships.
So you had to start really from zero.
From the scratch.
What did you struggle with, and what helped you? So first, what was the problems? What were the surprises? The not nice surprises. The language, the speed of life, then the makeup, colored hair.
Just realizing that you were different, and even communicating was different. So how do you walk up to someone and start talking to them, or what would make them take interest in you? How do you even start to make friends when you're so different? And just subtle things about the culture. So how do you know someone's actually interested or being polite? In the UK, I know people in the UK are known stereotypically for just being polite, but how do you form those real friendships? What really helped was church. So when we moved, my mum was a member of a church, so we went to church. And the church, more than most, they're quite welcoming and accommodating. So, we moved to Eastbourne in the UK, which is in the south, and has an elderly population, so they were quite keen on telling you, oh, I visited Ghana, or I used to date someone who who was of your colour. And at the time, that was acceptable. So coloured people, they would say, and obviously that was acceptable for them in their time. That in itself brings its own intercultural, where they'd call you a coloured person, and I wasn't used to being called a coloured person, so that in itself was interesting. But they were very welcoming and integrated us in the church and the youth. So the first group of friends were church friends before I started school the following January at Ratton.
So just to have an organization, it could be church or maybe people who just have a different story, who moved there, and that a lot of people who moved to another country, they just get on well with people who are not from this country but moved there too.
Exactly.
Just to look for
similar groups. So expat groups are really good for that, or meetup groups of other foreigners, because you've got that thing in common. So I think one of my very best friends actually, and we're still friends to this day, one of my oldest friends from the UK, she was Indian, and actually that's a bit of a sad story. At school she started bullying me before we became friends, and I had to nip that in the bud because I'm not the kind of person to be bullied. But whilst I was still finding my feet, that was quite hard, and I realized later on that because of her experience being a minority, so my brother and I were the only black people in the school.
So you and you have two brothers.
Yeah.
Were the only black people in the whole
school? In the whole school, we're the only black family. And I used to meet people that would say, oh, I saw your mum on the bus today. I'm like, my mum doesn't take the bus. But because they've seen another black person and you're the only black person they know, automatically you must be related to them. And it was an interesting, funny time to be there.
It's great that you can call it funny. Was it funny at that time too?
I think it was, I wouldn't say it was comical funny. I think it was interesting to see.
Okay.
And you had to sort of accept and be tolerant of people's experiences. You know, they weren't saying, I saw your mother just to be rude.
Yeah.
They genuinely believed it was your mother, and because that's their upbringing and their culture, they didn't know any other black families in the area, so it had to be someone that was related to you. Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, then you studied in
Birmingham.
Okay.
Yes, in Birmingham.
What did you study?
I studied international business, French and Chinese, Mandarin Chinese.
Okay, so how was that time? So probably it was more internationally?
Yes, so I moved to Birmingham, which is, I would say, well, certainly north of Eastbourne, north of London too. Birmingham is traditionally an Indian, Asian-dominated area, so that was different in itself. So I'd moved from the south, where it's predominantly white-dominated, to, well, the north. It's not the most northern part of England, but north to me, where it's more Asian. So suddenly I wasn't a minority, or as much of a minority anymore.
So there were probably more Asians than really
Yes, and yeah, exactly. More black people from London, so it was more intercultural, and also a lot of foreign students. So most of my friends were Mexican, Indian, from everywhere, and that was exciting. From Brazil, from Portugal, from Romania. It was an eclectic mix of people, and obviously studying international business with the languages. I had Chinese friends as well, mainly to help me with my coursework. A lot of Chinese friends, French. It was
Chinese?
amazing.
Okay, so when you when you have your Chinese friends, can you remember like a funny story or a story which was very surprising for you, like behavior, what they did?
It was interesting. I can think of two stories actually. Because I was studying Chinese as part of my degree, I joined the Hong Kong Chinese Society, thinking, well, if I hang out with them long enough, I can make some friends there. My flatmate at the time was the president of the club, and they had an extensive membership. But because I was the only one that's not Hong Kongese or Chinese, I wouldn't get invited to the meeting. So I pay my membership fees, but I don't get invited to it. And they speak in Mandarin or in Cantonese when they meet. It was mainly Cantonese because most of them were Hong Kong Cantonese, Hong Kong and Canton, China. So I thought, well, what's the point? Like, why am I being discriminated against? They were happy to collect my membership fees. Exactly, but I just don't get invited to these things. And even when I did go, because sometimes they'd host meetings in our flat, because my flatmate was the president, nobody would talk to me because my level of Mandarin wasn't as great as theirs, and culturally we were just so different. So that was interesting.
Okay, so now after all you've known and experienced, what do you think was the reason for that?
It's a cultural thing. People, birds of the same feathers, like to flock together, and when you have something in common, you like to work together. As I got better,
they are very, very close to each other when you are in group, but you are very, very far away, distance to people like who are out of the group. So
exactly.
If they are friends, they do much more for their friends than the Western people would do.
Definitely.
But if you don't belong to them,
you've got to build that credibility and gain membership into that group. And as I became better in Chinese and hanging out with them a lot more, I became part of the group. But it was really funny. We had a Chinese meetup group, and every week we'll meet up, do a language exchange. They used to help me with my presentations and my essays, especially with the characters. And we'll go out for a meal. So I'm the only black person with all these Chinese people in a restaurant. And every restaurant we go to, everyone will be given a chopstick or be given chopsticks, and they'll always hand me a fork. And my friends used to joke that I'm more Chinese than them because some of them were British born, so didn't speak the language as well as I did, or didn't know the culture as well as I did. But the assumption will be made that I was a foreign person out of it. And
they were probably shocked hearing you talking
Chinese or ordering in Chinese or even hanging out with them for that matter. So that was interesting when I became part of the group and the different treatments from different people until they knew me and realized, oh, actually, like she understands the culture.
Okay. Yeah, then you spent some time in China teaching English there.
Yes.
And how was that? What was your biggest surprise at first?
You know, for me personally as well, I think that was an experience on its own, because imagine an African child, so English wasn't my first language or mother tongue, so having now become English and then going abroad to teach English to people of different cultures. So I think for me it was like, oh wow. And then again, gaining their credibility when I got there, because when you expect an English teacher, you wouldn't expect someone that looks like me to come.
I would.
Well, you would. You were the intercultural expert. So coming there and proving myself, and I'm actually English, and yes, I can teach you the language. So for me, it was, oh wow, what an amazing turn of events. But also the reaction to people. I lived in different parts of China, and depending on where I was, there wasn't that many black people. And even in areas where I thought, oh, I've seen a couple of black people, I remember feeling like an alien, like I just dropped out of the sky. So in public transport, for example, you look around and everyone's pointing at you or talking or whispering behind your back, like you just dropped out of nowhere. And in England, I was used to being minority, but not the only one.
Yeah.
In Ghana, I was part of the majority and just normal. And then going to China and just being an alien, pretty much.
Okay.
So that was interesting for me. It was interesting that people would ask to touch your skin, to feel your skin. Is it real? And sort of questions that you would never imagine that you'll be asked.
Yeah,
So can I touch your hair? I mean, that happens in England as well, but can I touch your hair, or just can you take a photo with me? Like as if I'd earned the celebrity status by just being different in that place. So that was really interesting for me. And I think most people that have traveled to China, whether I think blonde and blue eyes, they get that a lot.
In India, yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's the same with being black and just from a different culture as well, and being English as well, so black and English.
So it was what they thought it was different
Absolutely.
and strange about you. What did you think about them? What was strange and different for you there?
For me, this might not be the most politically correct. I thought it was interesting because coming from what's called a third world, Africa, and seeing similarities in China, it's just like, well, how come we're the third world?
Okay.
Like, there's a lot of similarities. So the level of poverty was the same or equally worse. Again, and the economic disparity. You had one side of, I think in Shanghai, one side of the river is really well developed, and the other side, and it's as clear as day as night, you know, and you could see the differences. I think getting to know the different personalities, you know, first when you see a group of people, the culture, you can't really distinguish the different features or the facial features, and like I don't want to say they all look the same, but it takes you a while.
Yeah, exactly.
To distinguish the faces. And
they look really similar.
Exactly.
For us, if you don't, yeah. So,
and people from the north have different facial characteristics to the south. So by the time I left there, I could tell the differences. And funny, I remember this one very funny story where in my class I was like, and I thought I'd got the hang of this. And I'm like, is it just me or those two boys that really look alike? And I couldn't tell the difference between these two boys. And I think I'd waited for about a month before I asked one of my fellow foreign teachers, I was like, did those two boys look alike to you? And I realized they were twins. They were identical twins. So I wasn't going crazy. They really did look alike. So that was interesting.
Okay. So there was a time when you just didn't believe in yourself a little bit.
Yeah,
because
the
you
perception.
were so confused what's going on.
Because you don't want to buy into your own bias of, oh, everybody looks alike. Or what, and you're like, I'm pretty sure that boy and that boy look pretty similar.
Okay. So what did you learn from China? How do you think when you came back, how did it change you, or how did it influence your way of thinking, your mindset?
I think there's a level of humility that comes with traveling and experiencing different cultures. So you come, I think when you stay in one place, you tend to think, well, and especially when you're English speaking, you tend to assume, well, everyone speaks English. It's the most common language, technically. And this is normal. But when you go out and suddenly you're the minority, or actually that's not what they do there, and it's just different. You have a level of appreciation for the diversity in the world, and they do things differently, and they have these beliefs because of this. And so I compared some of the Chinese culture to Ghanaian culture. Like, we have some similarities, and you can tell maybe, for example, family life is different. And for your birthday, for example, we'll treat you and you buy other people a meal, whereas in Europe, you invite people for a meal and everyone's expected to pay for themselves, and if you're lucky, they'll pay for you because it's your birthday, whereas in China or in Ghana, you'd buy it for everyone else, and you'd be grateful that they're sharing your birthday with you or that ceremony. So that was interesting, and I found a new level of appreciation for cultural diversity, I guess.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. What would you recommend for either English or, say, Germans who go to China? What should they maybe consider before going there?
I think it's good to do the research first, and understand the culture, because it's understanding the language is one thing, and it's not important. So don't let that put you off if you're going there and you don't speak the language, because it's not important. But understanding the cultural subtleties will mean that you're not offended too much when someone says you can't come in, because you've got to earn that trust. Or when you're expected to...
So gaining trust is a big issue.
Gain trust, or if you're expected to bribe someone, it's part of the culture. And regardless of whether you think, we don't do it the West, so it's not ethical. Actually, it is ethical, because the whole system is built on they're paid less because they're expected to get more bribe. And so when you understand those subtleties, you're not as offended. So one instance, we foreign teachers were never invited to staff meetings, which we found irritating and frustrating, because you didn't know when holidays were coming up, you didn't know when they were changing the curriculum, and you just weren't kept in the loop. And that would be frustrating to most people, but when you understand the culture, that's just how they operate. So you're lucky.
You were teaching there and you weren't invited.
Exactly, to a staff meeting, and you would think, well, that's ridiculous. Like, I deserve to know this, but it's just how they operate. Okay. And when you were, you felt privileged. So I think we were talking about, would you ever get invited to a home, a Chinese home? You've got to earn that trust for them to invite you. But they'll invite you for a meal, and when you've even crossed that bridge of being invited for a meal, that's a huge achievement. So it's not just a staff party, because you could just as easily not be invited. So that was interesting.
You appreciate it, so you know that it was the next step.
Exactly.
Okay.
And build those relationships and build your credibility in that way.
Is there something you were missing after coming back from China to England, so that you say, actually, it was nice. I wish I could take it with me home to Europe.
I think, again, in terms of mindset, the significance, being treated like a celebrity everywhere you went, you kind of miss that, because when in Europe, you just blend in and you're just...
You're not as special.
Exactly, you're not as special, you're just part of the everyday furniture. Okay. So I kind of miss being made a fuss over. And yes, as irritating as it got sometimes, because there was no privacy.
Okay.
And it gave you a slight insight into the lives of celebrities, where people are taking pictures of you all the time, people are looking at you, people are pointing at you, and sometimes you can't help but take it personally. And I remember actually having a breakdown, sometimes crying about it, because I'm like, why am I being treated so differently, And for something that you can't change, is like your skin color, you've just got to deal with that. But then again, now it's something that I miss. And maybe I might just go back for that experience.
So do you think there is something English, or maybe the Germans too, could learn from Chinese?
Yes, I think there's a lot to be said about the community spirit that they have, helping one another, which I think more in the West, in Germany and England, we tend to be more individualistic. And that's good for self-confidence and achieving independently, but coming from a community spirit, it really helps with the human nature of wanting to be part of a tribe, wanting to have a family, a space that we can bounce ideas off each other and grow together strong. So I really love that about the Chinese, and I think the Germans and English world could learn to be a bit more like that, even in the work environment, in terms of your team spirit, fostering that team spirit and making people feel part of a team, because when they feel like we're all in this together, they work harder for the better.
So it's difficult to get into the group, but once you've got it, you've achieved it, you are in the group.
Exactly.
They would do much more for you.
Exactly.
And you would just feel the spirit and the support of the group.
Absolutely.
The price for it is that you, as you said, you miss being alone for sometimes.
Exactly.
Because, there's always people around you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Morgen geht es weiter mit Linda Boakye und ihren interkulturellen Erfahrungen in Frankreich.